Okay, so like imagine this. You've finally, landed the perfect spot for your shop,
Yeah.
your, small business, whatever it is. And things are going great. But then the rent goes up.
Oh, yeah.
Do you stick it out?
Oh,
Or or do you start that whole moving process again?
that is a tough call, I think. Especially in a market like we're in like the Dallas-Fort Worth area
Yeah.
where tenants have a lot of
Yeah,
choices.
exactly. And that's actually what we're diving into
That's
today.
right. Cool.
We have this really interesting article from Eureka Business Group,
Mm-hmm.
a commercial real estate firm here in Texas,
Okay, yeah.
talking about how property owners are maximizing lease renewals.
And it's interesting because they're not just like, throwing a free month or two at you.
Yeah.
It's some really creative strategies, I think, that
Uh,
that go way beyond that.
so no more, just like racing to the bottom on rent prices.
Yeah. Not necessarily. It's more about like Eureka Business Group's point is that it's about creating value for the tenant, creating genuine value for the tenant. And in a sense, making the tenant happier so that they stay longer.
Okay. I like that. I like that. So
Yeah.
give me an example of how this value add approach plays out.
So they had this good example of a strip mall owner who had a tenant that was hesitant to renew their lease because of a rent increase. And they totally understood this was a small business. It's like
Mhm.
understandable.
Right.
So what they did was they actually, created a website
Okay.
for the entire property, and they gave each tenant their own page with photos and descriptions. And the idea was to drive traffic right to the doors of these tenants.
So the landlord basically became like the marketing
Yeah,
part of that.
exactly.
That's really cool.
And it addressed a pain point that most small businesses face,
All right.
which is limited marketing budgets. And guess what? The tenant ended up loving the increased visibility and happily signed a new lease.
Wow. That's incredible. Turning a potential conflict into a win for everybody. I like that. So what other strategies do they suggest?
So they talk about proactive management, and they break it down into three main pillars. And it's kind of the idea of, being invested in your tenant's success,
Yeah.
not just collecting rent checks.
Okay. Let's break those down. So first up is tenant-specific marketing support. We saw an example of that just now. And I think you hit on something very key that a lot of small businesses struggle with, and that's marketing.
Absolutely.
So how are they doing that?
So property owners can step in with things like social media shout outs, featuring them in property-wide ads, you name it,
Yeah.
and, things like that to help them be more visible.
I even saw where they were talking about a property owner doing like monthly tenant spotlight videos,
Right. Exactly.
and that could create a buzz around their businesses.
Absolutely. And it builds community, that sense of community within the property,
Oh, for sure.
which is really huge for tenant satisfaction and retention.
Yeah. Okay. On to strategy number 2, enhancing property appeal. This one seems pretty straightforward.
Right. It
Yeah.
is. It is. But think about it like, signaling to your tenants that you're in it for the long haul. You're
Yeah.
constantly, making improvements. It shows that you care, and it elevates the entire property.
It's interesting. The article mentioned a power center owner who upgraded all the parking lot lighting.
Right.
And it's not flashy, but I bet the tenants felt safer. And I'm sure they appreciated the investment.
Exactly. It improves the experience for everybody, customers as well,
Yeah.
and the tenants definitely notice that commitment to quality.
And last, we have streamlined communication and resources. And I feel like that's just in any relationship, really.
Yeah.
Clear communication builds trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just making things as smooth and easy as possible. So things like easy to use tenant portals, online rent payment, quick responses from property management.
So basically, just make everything super smooth and easy for the tenant.
Exactly. Exactly. It really goes a long way in fostering that good landlord-tenant relationship that encourages renewals.
Okay, so we've seen how focusing on value can really create that win-win. But let's flip the script for a sec. What happens when property owners don't prioritize this?
Yeah. That's when you start seeing those for lease signs everywhere.
Right.
And vacancy comes with a cost.
I would imagine it's more than just missing out on a few months of rent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Think about all the lost rent during the time that it's vacant. You got to find new tenants, got to spruce up the place for them. It adds up really quick.
Yeah. Were we talking thousands of dollars here, or am I getting dramatic?
Not dramatic at all. The article actually mentioned a REIT that was struggling with high turnover.
Oh, wow.
And so they invested in property upgrades and tenant outreach.
Okay.
And you know what? They reduced their turnover by 30%.
That's amazing. That's a huge impact on their bottom line.
Huge. Absolutely. Because reduced turnover means a better net operating income.
Okay, so pause right there.
Hmm.
For those of us who don't speak fluent real estate,
Hmm.
what is NOI?
NOI is basically the profit that a property generates.
Okay.
So you take all the income, subtract your operating expenses like maintenance and taxes, and that's your NOI. It's like the financial health report for the property.
Okay, so a higher NOI means happy investors.
You got it. And that's really where, this value-driven approach we've been talking about really shines through.
Hmm.
The article highlights a shopping center owner that saw their portfolio's overall NOI jump by 17%.
Why?
Just by, doing all these things, implementing all these
Like
things. Yeah,
15%?
no, just goes to show, taking care of your tenants isn't just good karma.
Yeah,
It's a really savvy business strategy.
I like that.
Yeah.
So we've seen how focusing on tenant value can really boost that NOI. But I'm curious, does this apply to all types of commercial real estate?
It's a universal principle, but I think the how can differ depending on the property and also its location. Take the Dallas-Fort Worth market, for example.
Right, right. And we talked about how competitive DFW is. So does that make this approach even more important?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In a hot market, like DFW tenants have choices. So if you're a property owner and you're not going above and beyond,
Yeah.
tenants can easily go to the competitor across the street who is.
So it's almost like a tenant's market right now.
In many ways, yes. And that's why, property owners are having to get creative to attract and retain tenants. The old build it and they will come mentality
Right.
just doesn't cut it anymore.
Okay, so what are some examples of how property owners in DFW are going above and beyond?
So I think, first of all, they're really focusing on understanding their ideal tenant. Like, who are we trying to attract
Right.
and what makes them tick?
Because a cookie cutter approach isn't going to work if you're trying to attract, tech startups versus a family-owned restaurant.
Exactly. And once they know their target, they tailor their offering. So we're seeing things like flexible lease terms for startups, shared kitchen spaces for, up-and-coming food businesses, even on-site childcare, for companies with working parents.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's like they're becoming partners
Yeah.
in their tenants' success.
That's the shift. That's the shift in mindset. I think that's really important here. And it goes beyond just the physical space. We're seeing property owners in DFW create a sense of community
Okay.
within their buildings.
Like hosting, networking events,
Yeah.
workshops,
Yeah.
or even just creating those inviting common areas.
Exactly. Especially for small businesses, that built-in network is invaluable.
Yeah.
Fosters collaboration, fosters support, can even lead to new business opportunities.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And we can't forget the power of technology in all this.
Mhm.
I would imagine tenants these days expect a certain level of, digital convenience.
Absolutely. Online rent payments, maintenance requests, virtual tours, all these things really streamline the tenant experience and just make it enjoyable.
So it's not just about offering fancy amenities. It's about making things easy and efficient for the tenants.
Exactly. And another trend we're seeing, especially in DFW, is this focus on sustainability
Okay.
with this, with the, growing awareness of, environmental issues and things like that.
So things like energy efficient lighting,
Yeah,
water conservation, recycling programs, all those good things.
exactly. So you attract environmentally conscious tenants,
Yeah.
but it also, reduces operating costs in the long run for the property owner. It's a win-win.
Right. Another win-win.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like, being a successful property owner in a competitive market like DFW,
Hmm.
it takes a lot more than just collecting rent checks.
It does. It requires a proactive approach, a
Mhm.
creative approach, an approach that puts the tenant first, really at the center of everything.
Okay. So before we move on, I want to throw this out to our listeners. Imagine you're a property owner in DFW. What unique value proposition would you offer to stand out from the crowd and attract those dream tenants?
It's a great question, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
We've
Yeah.
talked about some really creative strategies that property owners are using to keep those for lease signs, put away.
Yeah.
And it's clear that understanding your tenants and their needs is so crucial, especially in a market like DFW.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is this is really like a shift in the whole dynamic between landlord and tenant. It's becoming less transactional and more of a partnership.
Yeah, I like that, the partnership idea.
Yeah.
I think both sides really benefit when the property owner is invested in the success of their tenants.
Exactly. Create that win-win. Everybody thrives. And I think all those examples that we talked about from the Eureka Business Group article really highlight that.
Yeah, they did. That strip mall owner who created a website for their tenants. That's such a great example of how a property owner can be a valuable ally.
Yeah, and it's not just about, making a website. It's about understanding their needs and addressing a pain point
Yeah.
that maybe they couldn't solve on their own.
Yeah, that's a great point. It wasn't just a generic perk. It was a very targeted solution
Right.
that made a real difference for that tenant.
And that's the key takeaway for our listener, I think. If you're a property owner or even just someone who works with tenants, the question isn't what can I offer, but what does my tenant need?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's about understanding your audience and finding those value propositions that really resonate.
Exactly. Requires a different kind of thinking. It's not about, just offering the lowest rent or the fanciest amenities. It's about, creating an environment where tenants feel supported and understood and empowered to succeed.
Yeah, and that success ultimately benefits everybody.
Right.
Happy tenants, longer leases, lower turnover, and a stronger bottom line for the property owner.
Absolutely. It's a cycle, a
Yeah.
good cycle. And it all starts with the change in perspective, I think.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a final thought. Imagine you're not just a property owner, but you know a curator of a thriving community.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do to cultivate that sense of connection and support, that shared success within your property?
It's a good challenge. And one that could lead to some really great solutions, I think.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully you found these insights valuable and you're ready to go create your own win-win scenarios.